January was another amazing reading month. I read 30 books this month, so let's do a monthly reading wrap-up of every book I read in January with my thoughts on them. I separate these out by genre, so we're going to start with fantasy. I did read 2 fantasy books this month. The first one was The Abandoned Realm, and I am completely obsessed with this book, and I keep recommending this to everybody who loves fantasy. This was 5 stars for me. This book has such a unique and interesting premise. This is about an author who abandons her story and basically sentences the main character in her story to get plucked from the fantasy world and put into what's called the Abandoned Realm, which is where all of the abandoned characters are. Then a portal is opened up between the abandoned realm and the actual real world on the San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge in the middle of a fantasy convention, and this book is so wild. The author and then the main character have to work together to try to close this portal and figure out how to restore the world as it was. I loved this. I highly recommend it. It's so unique and so good. The second fantasy book I read was the second book in Era 2 of Mistborn. This is Shadows of Self, and I loved every second of this book. I can't wait. I'm reading book 3 in February, and this series is so good. I, for some reason, did not think I'd love Era 2 as much as Era 1, but I am devouring this, and the ending to this book had me so shook. I feel like Brandon Sanderson does not normally end, books, and this isn't really a spoiler, but it's just, a darker and, a little more, sad ending than I'm used to, but I actually really liked it. What happened had my jaw on the floor, but also, made sense at the same time, and I just thought it was so well done. 5 stars for this as well. Highly recommend. The biggest category this month was by far thrillers. I read a lot of them, so we're going to go through these very quickly, but the first one is The Heiress by Rachel Hawkins. This is the first book I read by her, and I definitely will read more in the future. This is really well done. I gave this 4 stars. It's a little bit on the slower side, but the murder mystery vibes in it was very interesting, and I definitely liked it. The last thing he told me was so disappointing to me because the first half of this book I thought it was going to be a 5-star read. I was so invested. I loved it so much, and then it fell so flat. I almost think the author just didn't know what to do with this book because the ending was terrible and just kind of ruined the entire book for me. So I gave this 3.75 stars. I didn't really know how to rate this because the ending, or the first part was so good and the ending was so bad, so kind of met in the middle and gave it somewhere in the 3-star range. The Maidens was a pleasant surprise for me. I really disliked The Silent Patient, but I really enjoyed his newest book called The Fury that just came out in January, so I didn't know what to expect going into this, but I did really like it. It was 4 stars. This is a murder mystery, and it's set on a college campus, which I usually enjoy that kind of premise in a book, so I definitely really liked this. I gave it 4 stars. It's not my favorite thriller ever, but it's a very solid read, and I really liked it. The fiction writer was good. It wasn't very thriller-y. It was more on the mystery side. I liked it. I gave it 3.5 stars. It just wasn't anything standout for me, and I quickly forgot about it after I read it and haven't really thought about it since. Very similarly, I feel I just wasn't the target audience for Here in the Dark. I liked it, but I didn't love it. This is following a theater critic, and I feel if you're interested in theater, or if you're a theater high schooler, or a theater major in college, you'll probably absolutely adore this story. I just never had an interest in theater, so the main premise of this book just didn't draw me in a ton, but it is very interesting, and this is one that definitely bends the what is real and what is fake in this book, and that was really fun aspect to it, so I did like this. I just didn't absolutely love it, so I gave it 3 stars. On the other hand, My Name Was Eden was absolutely a standout book for me. I gave this 5 stars. The premise of this being that there's 2 twins, one of them dies in the womb and the other one is a teenager at this point and has a death experience and is revived, and when she's revived, she claims that she is the other twin now. Such a unique and interesting premise. I did not see the twist coming in this, and I really love this. Very gripping and a very short thriller, so highly recommend this one. It comes out on the 24th of February. Similarly, also coming out, I think on the 20th of February for this one, and this is The Guest by B.A. Paris, and her books never fail to be so wild. This was a little bit on the slower side for the first half, but the ending was so worth it. I could have never seen the main twist coming. My jaw was on the floor. It was so wild and crazy, and I absolutely loved this. I gave this 4.5 stars. Phantom Limb was a classic Lucinda Berry, so dark but so good. I completely thought I had this entire book figured out. I was so confident. I told my fiance all my predictions and was this is 100% what's happening, and I was almost right about one thing, but overall was not correct, and I thought that was so much fun because I thought I knew it so well, and she still surprised me. She is so good at writing such dark and moody and atmospheric thrillers that are so twisted and so messed up, but they're so good, even though that sounds wrong to say. I love them, and I gave this one 4.5 stars. Sticking with the really good thrillers, this is 4.75 stars for me. This is The Silence in Her Eyes, and it follows this woman who cannot see movement, so she can see, but every time she blinks, it's just a still shot. She cannot see any movement, and she's convinced that her neighbor is basically going to have something really bad happen to her. Her neighbor's going through a divorce, and she's convinced the husband is trying to hurt her, and this is so good and so twisty, and this is another one that bends what is real and what is fake, and I love that about this book. It's so good. The Curse of Penrith Hall was another one that just fell a little flat for me. I found the premise to be very interesting, but just for some reason didn't feel super invested in this book at any point, and it is a little bit on the longer side, and I don't know. I liked it, I just didn't love this one. I gave this one 3.25 stars, by the way, and then the next one is The Girls in the Garden, and this was 3.5 stars. I did like it. I love Lisa Joel's writing so much, but the ending felt like a little bit flat for me. I was hoping for there to be more to it, and overall it was a really fun read, but just the ending just wasn't quite what I was hoping for. Alice Feeney, His and Hers was really good, but very like strange ending. Like it's super crazy twist that I never predicted, but I also didn't like the twist. I didn't think it made a ton of sense, but I gave this 4.25 stars because it was a really fun read, and the ending took me completely by surprise. I just like kind of wish she didn't do that with the ending because I think she went for shock value rather than something that actually made sense, but overall it was a really fun read. Lastly, for thrillers, this is actually the first book I read this year and also one of my favorite books of 2023. I reread this, and I very rarely reread thrillers because like you already know the twist, but I had to give this a reread. It's one of my favorite books. This is The Last One by Will Dean, and this is the like suspenseful cruise thriller where this woman goes on this cruise, and the second day, she wakes up and her significant other is not in bed with her, and everybody else is gone from the ship, and she's alone on the ship that is charging full steam ahead into the Atlantic. And I love this book. Second time around, this is still a 5-star read for me. I highly recommend if you haven't read this one yet. If you like thrillers, it is a little on the longer side, but it is so worth it and so wild. But only read this one if you really like crazy thrillers. Like it's not necessarily going to make sense the entire time, but like in the best of ways, if that makes any sense. I still loved it, but it is a little bit on the wild side. Next up is historical fiction. My favorite historical fiction I read this month was Unsinkable. This is a cross between a Titanic historical fiction and World War II with seeds that are actually like real. So the main character, one of the two main characters, is somebody who actually survived the Titanic and survived 2 other ship sinkings, and she kept working on ships anyways despite having survived all of these crazy and traumatic incidents. And this was so good. I gave this 5 stars. I loved this. This is a type of book that wraps up with like a bow on top. It is very like really happy ending, but I love that about it. I love books that do that. So highly recommend if you like historical fiction, if you like Titanic, World War II, or you like just books that have a very satisfying and happy ending. Next up is Wayward, and this was near perfect for me. I gave this 4.75 stars. I can completely understand why this won in Goodreads Historical Fiction Book of the Year. This was so good, and I definitely wish I read this sooner, so highly recommend if you haven't picked this one up yet. Next category is YA, and one of them is a YA historical fiction, so I'm going to do that one next. This is I Must Betray You, and this was really good. I did not know anything about this book going into it. I actually thought it was a thriller, but it is a historical fiction, and I learned a lot in this book. This book is set in Romania, and I did not really know the history of Romania, but it kind of broke my heart at times, but also was so good. So it is a little bit on the sadder side of historical fiction, but I definitely recommend it if you want to learn more about Romania and what happened there, and if you're okay with a bit of a sadder YA book. The next YA book that I read was Tiny Dancer, and this is a graphic novel, and if you like graphic novels and you like dance, and this is going to be right up your alley. Super cute graphics. I loved the purple theme in it. I gave it 4 stars. I'm not personally a dancer, but I did really enjoy this story overall, and it has some really important messages, so I feel like a teenager in general could get a lot out of this book because it has some darker messages, but really important ones to read through. I definitely recommend it. What Happens After Midnight is another YA one. This one's actually a romance book, and this was so cute. I actually really liked this book, although I gave it 3.5 stars. The only reason it has that low of a rating, which is still a good rating, but not higher, is just because it is very straightforward. It's very one-dimensional. It follows exactly what you think is going to happen in this book, but it does it really well in a really cute and fun way. So I do definitely recommend this if you like YA books, but just don't expect anything groundbreaking or super crazy. But it is really cute, and I love the cover of this one so much. Our last stack here is romance books, and I read a lot of these this month because I am going to a romance-themed book event in March, so I'm getting a lot of these signed, so I wanted to read through them first. So the first one that I read is Mr. Hockey. This is actually not one of the ones I'm getting signed, but I love this. It's very short, and it's between a bookworm and an NHL hockey captain, and she's had a crush on him for forever, and it's really cute. It is a little insta-lovey just because of the size of it, but I adored this one. I thought it was really adorable. I don't think I mentioned, by the way, but this was 3.75 stars. I read the first and second book in the Dreamland Billionaire series. The first one was The Fine Print and then Terms and Conditions. The Fine Print was actually 5 stars for me. I thought this was so good. Terms and Conditions was 4.5 stars, so near perfect, but overall I'm really liking this series. I have one more book to go, and I think it's going to be really good too. Wildfire by Hannah Grace was just not my favorite. I gave it 3 stars. I didn't really love Icebreaker either, so I'm wondering if her writing is just not my favorite. 3 stars is still a good in my rating system, so I did enjoy it overall, but it just wasn't my favorite, and it was definitely nothing standout, so I'm not really sure. I feel like maybe I'll give her one more chance, and then we'll see from there. One of my highlights of the month was actually Mile High. This book was everything. I usually am not a fan of large romance books, but this is 450 pages, and I loved every single page of it. This was so good. I cannot wait to read the rest of the series. This is between a NHL hockey player as well as a flight attendant, and it is adorable. This is a bit of a forbidden romance because the flight attendant is the attendant on the team's private plane, and they are not allowed to date any of the players, but it is so good, and I absolutely adored it. Next up was Flawless, which I was really nervous to read, and I didn't love this, but I did like it. I give it 3.75 stars, and I do plan to continue the series because I did like it enough to continue. I'm not a fan of country things, though, so the country aspect of this was not my favorite. And also, like, I just felt like the characters needed a little bit more foundation to their relationship for me to, like, fully buy into it. But overall, it was cute. I gave it 3.75 stars. The Deal was another highlight for me. I did not expect to like this book just because of the cover, even though I've heard really good things, but this is so good. I need to get the new covers that aren't like this horrible because I don't like this cover, but this was 5 stars for me. I love this. This is a college hockey romance and ate up every single page of this. This is a little bit on the longer side. It's like closer to the like 370 page range, but it's so worth it, and I'm currently reading the second book and I can't wait to finish this series. It's so good. I've learned I'm not a paranormal romance girly. I did not really like The Fake Nate, but I could see it being really good. Like, the writing was good. I just don't like this, like, kind of theme in a book. It was between, like, 2 werewolf shifters, and I just found it bizarre. I didn't read, like, Twilight or anything growing up. I didn't have, like, anything leading up to this to get into paranormal romance, so I just feel like this was a little much for me, but I could see other people liking it. I gave this one 2.75 stars. The Balancing Act is really cute and wholesome. This is a romance book, but it also has like a lot of wholesome family dynamics and a family like being brought back together after kind of like having some issues, and it was really cute. I gave this one 4 stars, I believe. And lastly, the Mind F series. I only read 1 book in this series, but I gave it 4.5 stars. I thought it was really interesting. This is a homicide detective who is trying to track down this serial killer, and he's actually dating the serial killer, but obviously she's hiding that from him, and I really thought this was a fun and very interesting book, and I liked it. And that was all of them. Overall, it was a super fantastic reading month. I feel like I had a very absurd number of 5-star reads, which is obviously fantastic. So hopefully that like momentum and the really good reads follows right into February, and I can get some really good books read in February as well.